Welcome back, everyone, to Sip and Talk.
Great to be back.
So I have an update on the alley situation. It's escalated.
Oh, no. Don't tell me.
Remember the Garbage Mountain Sanctuary? Well, it received a new offering. I'm pretty sure it was an entire Thanksgiving turkey carcass.
Seriously. That's disgusting.
Right. It just smells like deep regret and, I don't know, ancient gravy out there now. Full-blown sociological experiment happening in my alleyway.
Wow. That is something else.
But here's the thing that really gets me. It's the collective knowledge. We all know who it is. The security cameras see it all. Yet nothing. Nobody says anything. Nobody reports it. It's this bizarre agreement to just collectively do nothing.
You know, that inaction, as foul as the turkey sounds, it's actually kind of a perfect, if smelly, metaphor for what we're diving into today.
How so?
Well, you see the problem, right? The stench is, let's say, undeniable. But people decide, it's messy, confronting the person, challenging the system that lets this happen. Not my problem directly.
But hang on. If nobody's allowed to speak up, even when the truth is right there, smelling up the place, doesn't that just make the whole area look neat on the surface?
Yeah.
Only because all the complaints and the criticism are just squashed. It's like a clean lie.
Exactly. And that's really the heart of it for this Sip and Talk. We're digging into that huge difference between systems that seem all squeaky, clean, and tidy because nobody can actually say anything is wrong, versus democracies, which are, messy, like your alley, maybe.
Definitely like my alley.
But that messiness, that chaos, it holds the potential for actual open correction, for real change.
Okay, I'm officially retiring the garbage pile analogy. Let's leave the deep political meaning of the turkey carcass for another time.
Fair enough. Agreed. Let's get focused on the mission for you listening today. We're really going to analyze the fundamental, the structural split between authoritarian systems and democratic ones.
And the big question driving it all is institutional, right? What's the core incentive? What really pushes the leaders in these completely different political worlds? Is it fear of losing votes or fear of losing face?
That's the core tension we're exploring.
All right, let's crack open this political engine then, starting with that fundamental anxiety. What's the number one thing that genuinely terrifies a leader, keeps them up at night?
Well, if you're talking about a democratic leader, it's actually pretty clear. It's almost procedural.
Okay.
They're worried about the next election. Simple as that, really. Their main driver is the vote. Their power isn't permanent. It's given to them by the people, through competitive elections, regular intervals.
And the beauty of that setup is that losing is part of the deal. It's baked right into the recipe.
Right.
Losing an election, sure, it's a political failure. Definitely stings. But it's usually not, fatal for them personally.
No, exactly.
You lose, you give a concession speech, maybe you retire, write a book, hit the speaking circuit. The system itself is built to handle that loss, to absorb it without the whole thing falling apart.
And that mechanism, that peaceful transfer of power, that's the core of accountability, isn't it? Democratic leaders have to be responsive. They ignore public demands at their peril.
Yeah, things like the economy, healthcare costs, inflation numbers, unemployment.
All of it. If they mess up badly on those visible things, they risk getting punished, at the ballot box. That constant pressure. It forces them, at least somewhat, to try and align what they do with what the public actually wants or needs.
Okay, but here's where I got to push back a little. Doesn't that constant pressure, the need to win the next election, create this really debilitating short-term focus? We see this all the time.
Oh, absolutely. That's a well-known structural weakness.
You're always living inside the bubble of the electoral cycle. 2 years, 4 years, whatever it is.
Political scientists even have a term for it, the time inconsistency problem. Basically, the leader knows that some big, hairy, painful reform,
like fixing the national debt or maybe overhauling ancient infrastructure.
Right. Stuff that might only pay off, 6, 8, 10 years down the line, long after they might be gone.
So instead of tackling that really hard long-term fix that might cost them votes now,
they drift towards the easier stuff, the popular things, instant gratification policies.
Tax cuts today, maybe some big subsidies tomorrow. Things that look good right now.
Exactly. It's classic political short-termism. You end up sacrificing that crucial long-term structural health just to get those immediate policy wins, secure the votes for the next election.
The system kind of forces their hand, makes them chase votes now, even if it's not the best thing for the country way down the road.
That's the democratic dilemma in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Now, let's pivot. Let's talk about the authoritarian system, because their core driver is completely different. It's all about maintaining face and absolute authority.
Okay, face. That sounds way more personal right off the bat. Less procedural.
It absolutely is, because think about where their power comes from. It's not bubbling up from the masses, from the voters.
Right.
It flows down. It rests on keeping a pretty narrow group happy. The top party bosses, the military generals, the heads of the secret police, the security apparatus.
And I guess maintaining that whole great leader image. The cult of personality thing.
That's a huge part of it, too. So their biggest fear isn't getting voted out by ordinary people.
Getting knifed in the back by the people right underneath them.
That's the core anxiety, losing control, losing authority, which in these systems translates directly to losing face in front of those key elite groups.
Because if the leader starts to look weak or like they messed up,
then those elites, the ones whose support is crucial, might just see an opening. They might think, maybe it's time for a change. They might move against the leader.
And that's why the stakes are just astronomically higher. Losing face for an authoritarian leader isn't like, okay, I'll go write my memoirs.
Not even close. It's often catastrophic, personally catastrophic. History's full of examples, purges, political liquidation, people just disappearing, threats to their actual life if they fall from power.
Losing is not an option. It's genuinely existential for the leader themselves.
Which means the leader becomes utterly fixated on the image. The regime has to look great. The leader has to seem infallible all the time, at all costs.
So any public criticism, anyone questioning a decision, admitting a mistake.
Huge threat. It's seen as a crack in the whole foundation, a sign of weakness that could bring the entire system crashing down around them.
Which logically leads straight to controlling information. That actually work.
Oh, it creates this really elaborate system of what you could call information laundering. Think about it from the perspective of a local official.
Okay.
Their career, maybe even their safety, depends on delivering good news up the chain. So they have this incredibly powerful incentive to lie, or at least to shade the truth, to suppress the bad data.
So the economic numbers might get massaged. The pandemic stats get tweaked. Details about some regional disaster get smoothed over.
Exactly. It all gets polished and manipulated as it moves up the hierarchy. Why? Because the guy at the very top, obsessed with face, needs to hear about success.
So they can keep projecting that image of competence, both to the public, but maybe even more importantly, to those critical elite groups, keeping them in power.
The face is the regime's main source of legitimacy. If that faith cracks, if the leader looks incompetent, their whole claim to rule weakens. The entire mechanism is at risk.
Wow. Okay, so summing that up, Democrats fear losing the people's back in the votes. Authoritarians fear looking weak to their inner circle, losing face.
That's the fundamental engine difference right there. And that contrast, between power that has to respond and power that just has to look good, it sets us up perfectly for the next big topic, the whole communist paradox.
Right. Let's start with the theory, the sales pitch, basically.
And it is, you have to admit, a really seductive idea on paper.
Totally. The promise is huge. Get rid of classes entirely, end worker exploitation, build a society where it's from each according to ability to each according to need. Sounds like utopia.
It's this abstract vision of perfect fairness. The state itself is supposed to eventually just wither away once everyone's basic needs are met. Universal happiness, real equality, like the end point of human history.
Okay, sounds amazing. So what's the immediate, the brick wall that every single attempt to actually build this system slams into?
Well, the argument, and it's a powerful one, is that the whole beautiful theory rests on one giant, unproven assumption.
Which is? That
human nature is totally selfless. Or at least that it can be made totally selfless by the system.
Reality suggests that the moment you introduce actual people with, their self-interest, their desire for a bit more power or influence, their different levels of wanting to work hard, the whole theory just kind of collapses under the weight of, humanity.
Yeah.
It assumes everyone will pull together for the common good, but it doesn't account for, people being people. And maybe more importantly, if you need a strong central power to enforce this selflessness, isn't that power immediately going to attract the least selfless people? The ones who crave control.
That's the inherent contradiction. The power needed to create the utopia inevitably gets corrupted by the very human traits the utopia claims to eliminate.
Which I think brings us to that classic story, the student debate anecdote. It really highlights the gap between the dream and the reality, doesn't it?
It does, perfectly. Tell it again because it's so spot on.
Okay, so picture this. University debate, right?
Right.
You've got a really passionate student just singing the praises of the communist ideal, true equality, shared wealth, no more poverty. Sounds great. Then someone, maybe a professor, maybe just a sharp listener, makes an offer. They say, look, I totally get your vision. It sounds amazing. So here's the deal. I will personally pay for you, full ride, all expenses covered, to go live in the communist country of your choice, whichever one you think does it best for 1 whole year. No catches.
And the student's response, almost every time.
A hard pass? Nope. Not going to do it.
And that refusal is the whole point. She loves the idea, the theory of guaranteed fairness, but she's terrified of the actual reality of living day to day in a state that controls everything.
She's not willing to trade the freedoms she has now, even in a messy democracy, like freedom to complain about the government, freedom to choose her job, just general quality of life stuff.
For the high price tag that comes with real-world communist regimes, she implicitly understands the reality.
What reality is that?
The reality of, special privileges for the party elite, constant surveillance, often a real lack of basic goods.
Oh.
She trusts the messy freedom she knows more than the abstract promise of fairness enforced by an all-powerful, unchecked state.
It's like knowing deep down that the road to that particular utopia involves giving up a lot of personal liberty along the way.
And that leads us right into the tough reality check, central planning. For decades, we've seen these attempts to run huge, complex economies from the top down, and the results, usually institutionalized inefficiency.
Yeah, we've seen this play out time and again.
Yeah.
Central planning just doesn't have those crucial feedback loops you get in a market economy. Like accurate prices telling you what's scarce and what's abundant, or competition pushing businesses to be better.
Exactly. How does some planning committee in Moscow decide how many tractors versus, say, pairs of shoes are needed in Vladivostok without real-time signals from supply and demand? How do they know?
They don't, really.
They don't. So you get these huge misallocations of resources, productivity just tanks. Think about Gosplan, the old Soviet state planning committee. They'd issue these massive 5-year plans trying to basically dictate the entire economy into existence.
But because the planners weren't really punished for getting it wrong, they were only punished if they admitted they got it wrong and made the leadership look face.
Right.
The system produced just crazy outcomes. Like in the 80s Soviet Union, you had people waiting in line for hours just for basic stuff like bread or maybe some sausage.
Because Gosplan decided, for ideological reasons, that heavy industry like steel production was way more important than, putting milk or meat on people's tables. The system could build missiles, sure, but it couldn't reliably deliver groceries.
And we still see echoes of this, right? You mentioned Venezuela earlier. They implemented these wide-ranging socialist policies, state control over major industries.
And the outcome wasn't equality or abundance. It was economic implosion. That mind-blowing hyperinflation figure over 1.6 million% in 2018. The promised prosperity just vanished into thin air.
Okay, now let's talk about maybe the biggest betrayal of the original promise. The whole idea of eliminating class differences.
Yeah, that one. It didn't quite work out as planned. They didn't get rid of classes. They just swapped out the old elite, the landowners, the factory owners.
For a new one.
For a new class, sometimes called the red aristocracy. And this class wasn't defined by having money or noble blood. It was defined by your position inside the Communist Party structure.
So instead of a capitalist owning the factory, the party elite basically owned the state. And they use that control to grab all the best resources and privileges for themselves.
Absolutely. We know, for instance, in the Soviet Union, high-ranking party officials had access to special stores completely separate from the public shops.
Right, the Berezovka shops, I think they were called.
Exactly. Filled with imported goods, high-quality stuff that ordinary citizens couldn't dream of getting. It was a formal, baked-in system of inequality.
Which has to breed massive resentment, right? It completely flies in the face of the whole equality promise.
Deeply. And then there's the whole incentive problem. If you abolish private property and you disconnect rewards from actual effort or innovation,
why bother working harder? Why try to make your factory run more efficiently if you get the same paycheck as the guy next door whose machines are falling apart?
There's no reason. The motivation to innovate, to be efficient, to take risks, it just evaporates. You end up with this phenomenon of collective laziness.
The whole system is almost structured to encourage mediocrity because taking risks or striving for excellence doesn't really get you anywhere personally.
It removes the individual risk, sure, but it also removes the individual drive. And that has huge consequences for the whole economy and society.
Okay, so if the authoritarian system is so obsessed with keeping up appearances, with maintaining face, it just seems logical that it wouldn't have much ability to, fix itself when things go wrong.
That's exactly right. The failure is almost baked into the design.
How so?
Because that obsession with never looking weak, never admitting a mistake, it means that all the normal tools a society might use to correct errors, think about a free press digging into problems, or an opposition party offering alternatives, or even independent courts challenging bad decisions.
Those things aren't just weak in authoritarian systems. They're seen as threats. They get actively dismantled or controlled. The system fears admitting it messed up more than it fears the actual consequences of the screw-up becoming a total disaster.
And when you concentrate all the power like that in one leader or one tiny group, the risk of a really bad policy decision just goes through the roof, doesn't it?
It's extreme policy risk.
Yeah.
If that small group makes a terrible call, there's no institutional brake pedal, there's nothing to stop the train wreck, the mistake just gets amplified across the whole system.
And this is where some of those historical examples are just chilling.
Yeah.
Because they show the cost of protecting face can literally be human lives.
Tragically, yes. Take Chernobyl in 1986. The immediate reaction from the Soviet government wasn't, oh my God, public safety first.
No, it was cover-up mode, right?
Total cover-up mode. Yeah. The priority was preserving the Soviet image, the idea that their technology was superior, infallible. Local officials were scared stiff to report the full scale of the disaster, the meltdown, up to Moscow.
Because they knew reporting catastrophic failure meant their heads would roll. And Moscow, in turn, was terrified of admitting the systemic failure to the rest of the world. The entire chain of command was incentivized to minimize, delay, and obfuscate.
The ideology demanded that a communist system couldn't have a disaster like that. So admitting it happened would shatter the face of the party.
Precisely. And that delay, that refusal to acknowledge the reality to protect the image, it cost untold lives. Delayed evacuation meant millions were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation, all to save face.
And we saw a similar pattern, maybe on a different scale, but the same mechanism, more recently with how the COVID-19 outbreak was initially handled in Wuhan. Right?
Yeah, early 2020, you had Dr. Lim Wenliang, the ophthalmologist, who tried to warn his colleagues online about this new SARS-like virus he was seeing.
And instead of officials saying, whoa, thanks for the heads up, let's investigate.
The local bureaucracy, probably terrified of disrupting the official narrative of stability, especially right before the big Lunar New Year holiday, they hauled him in and reprimanded him for spreading rumors.
Silencing the messenger instead of listening to the message.
It's a direct result of a system that prioritizes political control and image management over confronting an uncomfortable reality. Local officials were scared to be the ones to deliver bad news that might upset the central party's story of competence. That fear, that need to protect face, creates this deadly inertia, especially in a crisis.
And then there's the whole succession issue. If there are no scheduled elections, no clear rules for how power changes hands, isn't that itself a huge source of instability?
Massive risk. Power transitions in these systems are often really murky, secretive, and dangerous because the stakes are so incredibly high for those involved. Losing power can mean losing everything. The succession process often turns into brutal infighting behind closed doors. Purges, maneuvering, sometimes even violence. There's just no reliable, peaceful, predictable roadmap for leadership change, like you have, flaws and all, with democratic elections.
Okay, so those are huge political flaws. But what about the impact on society more broadly, like innovation?
That gets stifled too. When political loyalty, being in the right faction, saying the right things, having the right connections, the whole nomenclatura system, when that becomes more important than actual professional skill or expertise, the whole economy, the whole society suffers. You get strict controls over what people can discuss, what ideas are allowed, and that just suffocates genuine innovation and creativity.
You used the example of East Germany versus West Germany earlier, specifically the cars.
Right, the Trabants. It's almost a caricature, but it's real. This little car, smoky two-stroke engine, its basic design barely changed from the 1950s right up until the Berlin Wall fell. Because in that centrally planned communist system, there was zero market competition pushing for improvement. No real incentive for engineers to make it better, faster, cleaner. And probably no freedom to pursue radical new ideas without getting party approval, which likely wouldn't come.
Meanwhile, just over the border in West Germany,
you had this explosion of automotive innovation, Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, constantly competing, constantly improving. The open, competitive environment fostered that freedom to create, which the controlled environment just crushed.
And the last piece here seems to be information itself. Strict censorship. like China's Great Firewall. What does that do long term?
It creates these massive information silos. The public just doesn't get exposed to different perspectives, alternative viewpoints. They mainly receive the official state narrative repeated over and over by state-controlled media.
So it's hard for people to even know what they don't know.
Exactly. It reinforces the government's story and makes it incredibly difficult for honest feedback, even negative feedback, about failing policies to filter up to the top. It creates an echo chamber where bad ideas can persist because the leader only hears what they want to hear or, what their underlings are too scared not to tell them.
This is all making sense institutionally, but there's a psychological piece here that's fascinating.
Yeah.
How do people living in these really tightly controlled states come to accept things like constant surveillance or heavy censorship as just normal, or maybe even like a good thing?
Yeah, it's more than just acceptance often. It's adaptation. Think about it. If you grow up, maybe for decades, under a system with institutionalized propaganda, pervasive surveillance, you mentioned the estimate of nearly 500 million CCTV cameras in China, that's staggering.
Mind-boggling.
It normalizes these restrictions. People learn very quickly how to practice self-censorship. It becomes a basic survival skill. You internalize the red lines. You learn what not to say, what not to search for online, who not to talk to about certain topics. You become your own policeman, in a way.
And the government actively pushes a narrative to reinforce this, right?
Yeah.
They don't just censor. They try to convince people that freedom itself is dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very deliberate message. Equate free speech, public protest, open debate with chaos, with instability, with things falling apart.
So they point to maybe messy elections or loud protests in democracies and say, see, look how disorderly, look how unsafe. We provide order, we provide stability. Don't rock the boat or you'll end up like that.
It's a potent political framing, especially in societies that might have a strong cultural history of valuing the collective over the individual.
How does that cultural piece play in?
Well, in some cultures, there's a deep-rooted tradition of sort of paternalistic governance. The idea that the state or the leader is like the ultimate parent figure.
And the parent knows best.
Right. The parent knows best, and the parent's job is to maintain harmony and order, even if it means restricting the children's freedom sometimes. So for many citizens conditioned this way, the government exercising strong control doesn't feel oppressive. It feels appropriate. Expected, even.
Which leads to that idea of the economic exchange. People essentially making a bargain in their minds.
Exactly. It's often framed as a pragmatic trade-off. Okay, maybe I don't have total freedom of speech or the right to protest, but in return, I get economic stability. I get personal safety as defined by the state, of course. The government keeps things orderly, and that's worth giving up some liberties for.
Surveys actually show this, right?
Yeah.
That significant numbers of people in some controlled states do believe government monitoring is necessary for their own safety and social order.
Yes, studies indicate that. It's a belief that the state's control is fundamentally protective.
But here's the crucial contrast. The definition of safety in a democracy is almost the complete opposite.
Totally different. In a healthy democracy, safety doesn't mean safety through absolute state control. It means safety from arbitrary government control. Meaning you're protected by the rule of law. There are clear limits on what the state can do to you. Your rights, your property, your person are supposed to be secure against the government just deciding to interfere on a whim. That's the source of democratic safety.
Okay, so what about the chaos? The loud debates, the protests, the critical news reports that authoritarian states point to as proof of instability.
From the democratic perspective, that chaos isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the system's vital sign. It's the brake mechanism.
The way to catch mistakes before they get huge.
Exactly. It's the ability for problems to be exposed publicly, debated openly, and for policy to be changed peacefully before it leads to disaster. That messiness is actually the system trying to correct itself.
It's not instability, it's vitality.
It's self-correcting vitality. And look at the real-world evidence. If you check global rankings for safety, stability, low crime rates, which countries consistently come out on top?
Usually the high-freedom democracies, right?
Yeah.
Like Scandinavia, Switzerland, New Zealand.
Precisely. Countries with high levels of personal liberty and strong democratic institutions consistently prove to be among the safest and most stable places on Earth. High freedom does not equal anarchy or chaos in practice.
So the noise, the arguments, the messiness, that's just the sound of the system actually working, airing its dirty laundry in public so it can get cleaned up.
Whereas the authoritarian system tries to keep everything hidden behind this perfect facade of stability, until the internal pressure builds up so much that it risks a catastrophic explosion.
That difference, absorbing failure versus hiding failure, seems like everything.
It really is the core institutional distinction. Okay, so let's try and pull all these threads together. Let's summarize the core structural difference we've been unpacking for you, our listener.
All right, on one side, you've got democracy. The engine is driven by the constant need to win votes, which forces leaders, even if imperfectly or with that short-term bias we talked about, to be generally responsive to what citizens want and need. The system is designed, essentially, to tolerate a bit of chaos and messiness so that it can publicly correct its mistakes over time.
Then on the other side, you have authoritarianism. The engine here is driven by the absolute need to maintain face and keep that elite coalition happy.
So the priority isn't really public welfare in the immediate sense. It's stability, control, and making sure the leader always looks infallible.
Exactly. This system is designed specifically to hide errors, to suppress dissent, and to ensure the leader's power looks absolute, even if that means ignoring huge problems until they become systemic catastrophes.
And this fundamental difference in how the systems work, it shapes everything, doesn't it? Even how they define something as basic as happiness.
That's a really interesting way to put it. In the communist or authoritarian model, there's an underlying assumption that the state or the party knows best. They decide what constitutes happiness or a good life for the collective, and then they mandate the one single path to achieve it.
The message is kind of paternalistic. We'll take care of your welfare. Your job is just to fit in, contribute, and follow the plan.
Whereas in the democratic system, the core idea is radically different. It's that the individual gets to decide what happiness means for them.
And they have the freedom to pursue that definition however they see fit, within the bounds of the law, obviously.
Right. The government's main job isn't to define happiness for you, but simply to protect your ability to chase your own version of it, to create a playing field where you have the freedom to try.
So one system trades individual freedom for a top-down promise of security and equality, a promise that, as we saw, often ends up with a new elite class and scarcity.
While the other system embraces the messiness, the risk, the chaos of public debate and competition. But crucially, it builds in those mechanisms for self-correction when things inevitably go off track. That ability to adapt and fix mistakes openly is arguably its greatest strength.
And just a reminder for everyone listening, here on Sip&Talk, we're really just trying to lay out how these different institutional machines work based on observation and analysis.
Yeah, our goal isn't to bash any particular country or people. It's purely about understanding the incentives and consequences built into these different political structures.
We hope you can use this kind of institutional comparison just for your own critical thinking. Like when you see a big government action, whether it's here or abroad, ask yourself that core question.
Is this move primarily about winning votes and responding to public pressure? Or is it more about maintaining face, controlling the narrative, and consolidating power? Understanding the likely driver helps you evaluate the whole situation differently.
That framework, votes versus face, is super helpful. Before we wrap up, let me toss out one last thing for you to chew on this week.
All right, always ready for the final provocative thought. Hit me.
Okay, so if an authoritarian system is fundamentally built on this deep fear of admitting failure, this terror of losing face, what happens institutionally when that system gets slammed by a reality that is truly catastrophic and absolutely undeniable?
Like what?
Like, say, a massive, prolonged economic depression that affects everyone, or a devastating natural disaster that just can't be hidden or spun, something where the failure is just out there for everyone, including the elites, to see. How does a system fundamentally based on hiding failure cope when its deepest fear suddenly becomes a public, unavoidable reality?
Wow. Yeah, that's the moment of maximum danger for that kind of system, isn't it? When the official story, the carefully constructed face, just completely shatters against hard reality.
What happens then?
Well, historically, that's when the internal legitimacy cracks wide open. The elites might start to question the leader's competence, their mandate. The risk of instability, maybe even internal conflict or collapse, goes way up. That's a heavy thought to end on.
Indeed. Food for thought, anyway. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another Sip and Talk.
We really hope this exploration of political incentives, accountability, and face saving was useful for you.
Please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for Sip and Talk wherever you get your shows. And you should definitely go check out our good friend Mickey's YouTube channel. It's called Mickytolife.
Oh, yeah, Mickey's great.
He's got awesome stuff. Really funny memes, some surprisingly insightful spirit-tasting videos, and all his latest European travel vlogs. If you need a laugh or some escapism, Mickey's your guy.
Absolutely worth checking out. Fun stuff over there.
All right, everyone. We'll catch you next time.